Thank you, everyone. I'm Ed McCann. I'm the founder of Writers Read and your host for today's show. Writers Read creates opportunities for writers, and we create memorable experiences for you, our guests, and our YouTube viewers, and for the writers whose work we feature, whether they are established or emerging, because at Writers Read, it's just all about craft and a writer's ability to present an engaging personal story. All the stories we feature on our stage, our YouTube channel, our publications, and our podcast are a maximum of 650 words, which translates to a 5-minute spoken word performance. We're delighted to present this performance at CPW, the Center for Photography at Woodstock, in its remarkable new home here in Kingston, which is the original capital of New York State, to celebrate writers and the spoken word with you. A photograph freezes a moment in time, but some images stay with us long after that moment has passed, prompting memories and emotions that grow deeper with time. We ask the writers that you're about to meet to consider a photograph that they keep returning to, whether physically in their environment or mentally in their mind's eye, perhaps from a family album, a book, a museum, or elsewhere, and to write the story behind it or the story that has grown out of it. Writers Read's editorial team, led by senior editor Stephen Lewis, reviewed nearly 100 submissions on this topic, far more good work than we could present at one event, and these are the pieces we've chosen to share with you now, so let's get right to it. Writer Kathleen Bennett Bastis was a producer of talk radio, and she wrote hundreds of short, descriptive 5-minute segments about neighborhoods, restaurants, product alerts, or shopping experiences in the tri-state area. A small business owner for 35 years, for the last 15, she's focused her creative energy on making art, first as a welder, then creating work in found objects harvested from scrapyards and the streets of New York. For the past year, she's been exploring paper as a new medium, but with paper, Kathleen lets her marks, cuts, and folds tell the story, beginning with a blank page. Kathleen divides her time between her New York City apartment and her Creekside home in Saugerties, and she opens our show with her story, The New Traditionalist. Please give a warm welcome to Kathleen Bennett Bastis.
And there it was, a giant black and white photograph of me and my 2 sons displayed on the side of a New York City phone booth. It was a shock, but not a surprise, as I had agreed to participate in an ad campaign celebrating the centennial anniversary of Good Housekeeping magazine. I was both excited and embarrassed. Excited because there we were in a phone booth, but also embarrassed because, well, there we were on a phone booth with a caption that said, "The New Traditionalist. She started a revolution with some not so revolutionary ideals. America is coming home to good housekeeping." Later, in a full-page ad in the New York Times, the caption read, "She was searching for something to believe in, and look what she found. Her husband, her children, her home, herself." She's a contemporary woman who had made a new commitment to the traditional values some people thought were old-fashioned. Earlier that year, I had been approached by the mother of one of my son's first-grade classmates. She worked for the agency that was creating the campaign and said she thought I'd be a good fit. She mentioned some vague details that the campaign would highlight real mothers and their children. And by the way, the photo would be taken by the famous photographer, Mary Ellen Mark. I thought, hey, if nothing else, I'll get a great portrait of me and my kids. But what she didn't flesh out were the details of the campaign itself and how my photo would be used. Nevertheless, it was kind of exciting, and once the photo was taken, I signed off and forgot about it. My focus was on my family, raising my sons, and continuing to expand a small business I had started 7 years prior, after I figured out that my salary as a producer for talk radio wouldn't cover the cost of childcare. I worked from home, giving me the flexibility I needed. After the whole campaign launched, there was an immediate outcry from prominent feminists, including Betty Friedan, who said, "This is what I've been warning about. This is the new feminine mystique defining women once again in terms of their husband, family, and home." And according to an article in the LA Times, an economist whose focus was women and work apparently kept the New York Times photo of me and the boys in her purse, showing it to colleagues with the question, "What's this all about?" And so the photo of me and the kids ended up being both a symbol of the good housekeeping new traditionalist and a target for the outraged feminists. I will admit I never thought of myself as a prop, but there I was in black and white, being used to the advantage of both sides. I was just a three-dimensional woman on a two-dimensional poster. I mean, it's not like I was modeling a dress for a department store where I was just this anonymous mannequin. It was me, a real mother and her real children, which brought the thing much closer to home. I was just their cutout doll, with both sides determined to define that woman, dressing her up in whatever label suited their side. But it was the word searching that really hit a nerve. I hadn't been searching for anything. I was living my life, exploring and learning what would give me fulfillment and a balance that allowed me to raise my sons and bring in an income. I always tried to make the best choices for me and my family, which eventually turned out not to include the husband. But in the end, despite it all, the one positive was that I now have an amazing black and white portrait of me and my sons taken by the famous photographer Mary Ellen Mark. No caption required.
John Leonard Pielmeier began his career with the play and movie Agnes of God, followed by 3 more plays on Broadway and over 25 produced television movies and miniseries. He's received the Humanitas, Edgar, Camey, and Christopher Awards and 5 Writers Guild Award nominations. His adaptation of William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist played in the West End, toured the UK, and is New York bound. Fittingly, John enjoys watching horror films, and though he can view an unsuspecting ingenue's beheading without flinching, it's impossible for him to watch that same character get a flu shot. John traveled today from his home in Garrison to present his story, simply entitled Pix. Please say hello to John Pielmeier.
There are 2. The first is my father in his 30s, black swimsuited, confidently posing with hands at his sides, muscles lean and articulated, broad smiling like I've never seen him smile. Water, his medium, ripples behind him. He is a Red Cross swimming instructor standing on the edge of a lake. Looped around his neck is a leather lanyard, dangling from it his silver whistle. He has not yet met my mother, may even now be dating a woman his children come to know only as Ginny. We've seen home movies of them together. We've seen them kissing. They laugh in love, meant for each other. But of course, they're not. Religious differences force a separation. But he was happy then. The second is my mother in her 30s, posing for a photo in a studio in her hometown. Her dress is dark, collar turtleneck high, a pin above her heart. Her left hand is folded across her chest, showing manicured nails painted probably scarlet red. A ring glints in the shadows. Is she married? Is this a portrait she sent to my father in the war? She's looking directly at us, smiling, her teeth perfect, her skin, as always, aglow. She is relaxed, beautiful in a Hollywood in the 40s kind of way. She's working as a secretary for the local Girl Scouts. She was happy then. She meets my father on a Sunday morning hike. He's the leader. She accompanies a girlfriend. He asks her out. He falls in love. She finds him interesting, kind. At home, she is caring for her dying dad. An alcoholic, his arteries, as they said back then, are hardening. One day, this swimming, hiking, red-crossed bachelor comes to visit and as a kindness carries her father upstairs to help him into bed. Afterwards, the old man says to her, "He's the one." Months later, in November, the one calls her and asks, "Aren't you going to wish me a happy birthday?" "My dad died today," she tells him. In January, he asks her to marry. She isn't sure. She cancels a date she's scheduled with another man later in the week and tells my father, yes. They marry weeks before he leaves for war. In Europe, working still for the Red Cross, he handles battlefield dead. Retrieving bodies, perhaps. Going through pockets, rucksacks, writing their loved ones, sending their watches, wallets, dog tags home to grieving wives, parents. He doesn't see my mother for 3 years. Does she send him this photo? How often does he take it from a pocket to look and remember? When he finally returns, he's suffering. They called it shell shock back then. Today we have another name. He and my mother never speak of this. I learn about it in a letter. He's offered an important job with the Red Cross. He turns it down. His sisters need him home, need him to take over the family business. He's loyal. He stays. He and my mother have a child. They're happy again. The baby's beautiful. She dies in my mother's arms when she's 6 weeks old. My father questions God, his faith. My mother never cries again. They have 2 more children who survive. In time, my father loses his hearing, his balance, his strength. He has heart attacks, strokes. The family business closes. My mother cares for him, takes a job again as secretary. He dies. She moves in with her sister, then with her daughter. She worries. She never cries. She has a stroke. In time, she dies. 2 photos. They didn't know then of the dead they would one day hold, of the sadness, the decline, the sickness, and disappointment. They were happy then. I have my father's silver whistle. When I blow it, I feel contented, confident, so happy. And of course, I have the pics.
Emily Rubin writes and runs creative writing workshops from the Hudson Valley home she shares with her husband Les Baum and their dog Lucinda. A Pushcart Prize nominee and recipient of several writing awards, she's been widely published, and essays from her collection Adventures with a 100-Year-Old Mother, Inventing a Life, have been featured in Oldster Magazine, Humans of the World, and Sad Girl Diaries. With a BA from Bard College and an MFA from the Writers' Foundry of St. Joseph's University, she also runs creative writing workshops from Mount Sinai Hospital and upstate New York cancer centers. She's also lectured at Bard College, taught fiction at Columbia University's Narrative Medicine program, and she joins us today to share her story, I Stalked Charles Mingus. Please welcome Emily Rubin.
The photograph is of Charles and Sue Mingus, with me lurking in the background, taken in the fall of 1977 on the grounds of Bard College on Family Visiting Day. That year, I was a senior in the dance and theater department. I remembered that day on campus, especially how everyone was gobsmacked and starstruck that Mingus, the genius jazz composer and bassist, would be gracing the campus with his presence. He and Sue were touring the campus, visiting her son and his stepson, a fellow student. At the time, I was immersed in choreographing emotionally raw, unpredictable dances, and I used improvisational jazz and a little bit of Bartok mixed in for my dance soundtracks, collaborating with jazz musicians and composers in the music department. They were also talented, knowledgeable, reverent, and fanatical about Mingus. So I was well schooled in his and others' compositions that inspired us by the depth, fluidity, and subversive playfulness of intertwining rhythms and the incredible musicianship. Wow. When word went out, the buzz about Mingus competed with the swarming yellow jackets in front of the dining commons that October. A good friend had a collection of Mingus's albums and invited me to listen before heading out to get a glimpse of the maestro in person. After playing several cuts from the Changes One album, we ventured out, high on the tunes, skipping along the winding paths that led to the library, playing fields, waterfalls, and idyllic mansions and gardens of the Bard campus, looking for and stalking Mingus. We eventually found him, and without anyone's knowledge, I ended up in the photograph. The following spring, Mingus came back to Annandale-on-Hudson to perform with vocalist Sheila Jordan, Ricky Ford on tenor sax, Charles Tolliver on trumpet, and Danny Richmond on drums to a standing room only intimate performance in the dining commons. The music was glorious, and I was sure at one point Mingus looked over at me and nodded. Maybe he remembered me from the day I followed him around campus. Nearly 30 years later, the memory of that day obscured by time and circumstance, I opened the alumni magazine, and to my great surprise, I saw my 20-year-old self, hands shoved into the pockets of my khaki chinos, lurking in the background, trying to be cool. And it all came back to me in sharp relief. And thinking it would be wonderful to have a copy of the photograph, I contacted the picture editor of the magazine through the alumni office. It was sometime in the mid-2000s, long after I graduated in 1978. Charles Mingus died in 1979 at the age of 59, and Sue Mingus had carried on his legacy until she died in 2022. She produced concerts and music workshops, several of which I attended at the Club Fez under Time Cafe on Lafayette Street in New York. The magazine editor told me, Sue Mingus granted us the use of the photograph, so you'll have to be in touch with her to get a copy. The editor gave me a phone number, which I stared at for days. I finally called while sitting on the edge of my desk chair in my apartment on East 7th Street. My stomach twisted and tense, my heart beating in nervous syncopation, hoping she would grant my request. She answered on the first ring, and I haltingly explained why I was in touch. I remember that day. We were visiting my son, Roberto. Which photo are you talking about? There are so many, she said. I described the scene and confessed my presence in the photo. I know which one it is. Charles with the ever-present cigar. I'm clutching my coat because it was freezing. I hate the cold. We laughed. She took my address to send a disc with a copy of the photograph. Amid my excessive thanks, she interrupted me to say, "So that was you." We wondered who that was in the background. Glad to have that mystery solved. A week later, the disc arrived, and 20 years after that, the photograph hangs in my studio and reminds me of the time Charles Mingus looked out at a hall full of adoring fans and nodded at me. Maybe he even smiled.
Arlen Gargagliano grew up with a wall of photos in her home, yet it wasn't difficult for her to pick a favorite. Her maternal grandparents, both born and raised in Brooklyn, were big on documenting their lives through photos, and Arlen carries on the tradition by not only guarding a score of photo albums, but also boxes of photos she shot and developed in college, as well as those she inherited from her family. These days, she only displays a few select photos on shelves and an ever-changing refrigerator door gallery. She's the author and co-author of over a dozen Latin-themed cookbooks, a How to Succeed for musicians, and several English as a second language textbooks. Arlen is working on her first novel and takes the stage now to share her story, The Day My Grandparents Met. Please welcome Arlen Gargagliano.
Did I ever tell you about the day I met your grandmother? My grandfather sits across from us in his Barcalounger in the living room of their 6th-floor apartment on Brightwater Court in Brooklyn. His signature light blue Cuban guayabera shirt accentuates his blue eyes and tan skin. My younger sister and I, ages 6 and 8, sit next to each other on the couch. He opens one of his large hands to reveal a half-dozen Hershey's Kisses, and we eagerly reach out to take them. When I met your grandmother, she was the most beautiful girl in Coney Island. Dimples appear in his meaty cheeks above his mustache as he picks up his Cuban cigar from the resting place on the large glass ashtray. I saved her on that very day from drowning in the ocean. He nods towards the framed photograph that sits before us on the coffee table. Just look at that. That is the photo that we grew up with, and the one that my children have grown up with, and the one that now sits on a shelf in our apartment living room for all to see and admire. According to family lore, it is the definitive photograph, the one that documents my grandparents' meeting. Taken probably in 1930, when they were respectively 19 and 22 years old, the sepia image shows my grandparents on the beach in Coney Island, standing in the sand with a crowd and a pavilion on the boardwalk behind them. My grandfather, Nathaniel, is wearing a one-piece bathing suit and sucking in his stomach while inflating his chest as he holds my grandmother in a kind of half embrace. He stands proudly, smiling next to a gleeful Sophie, my grandmother, who also wears a one-piece bathing suit that looks more like belted shorts and a tank top. Her long, dark braids reach down to her waist. Nat, Grandma shouts from the kitchen. She's cutting up cantaloupe for my sister and me. They know the story, and no chocolate treats before lunch. So your grandmother, Grandpa continues, ignoring Grandma, didn't know how to swim. And there she was, going right into the water. Oh no, we say in unison as we unwrap our treats. And then, what could I do? I saw this gorgeous woman struggling in the water. I had to save her. As if on cue, Grandma walks in with a tray, a few plates and forks, and a bowl of cantaloupe chunks. She places all on the table in front of us. She spots the kiss wrappers and gathers them up. Oh, Nat, what did I tell you about the chocolate? She gives him a smile and a light tap on the shoulder. And don't you think they've heard that story enough? She picks up the fruit-printed tea towel that had slipped from her arm and heads back to the kitchen. Grandpa tips the ashes of his fat cigar into the ashtray and leans towards us. She never did learn how to swim, he says in a stage whisper. Now she goes to the beach every day. But she just wades, and that's okay. We go down to the beach later that day. Grandma is wearing one of her white terry cloth cover-ups over her dark green one-piece suit. We spread a blanket on the sand. our grandmother tucks her salt and pepper curls into a highly decorated floral bathing cap and walks us into the water. Grandma is in the middle, bending over slightly to reach our hands. I'm dying to run into the water. I know how to swim, but I love Grandma and the warmth of her hand, so I keep mine in hers. We stand together in knee-deep water. She swings our arms. Together, we splash.
Lynn Edelson divides her writing time between memoir pieces and short stories. Her narrative essays have presented in the New York City Listen to Your Mother show, and her work is widely anthologized. She was also a recent finalist for the Eunice Williams Nonfiction Prize for her piece In the Company of Women. Lynn is the mother of 2 grown sons. One is a writer and the other a musician, which makes her fairly certain neither one of them is ever going to buy her a beach house. Still, hope springs eternal, and in the meantime, she continues to love her Hudson Valley home in Brewster, where she lives with her husband Michael and a beautiful dog that she says sheds far too much. In her essay, Outside the Frame, Lynn imagines a conversation that might have happened. Please give a warm welcome to writer Lynn Edelson.
My parents are standing side by side, smiling for the camera. They have been gone for 30 years, buried side by side, a year and a day apart. My father was a dicey guy, prone to silences or fits of anger. It would have been easier had he just stuck to that narrative, but he was also funny, charming, and beloved as everyone's Uncle Walter. He's grinning in the photograph, clearly in a good mood. I know my mother is only smiling for the camera because her smile was rarely that big, unless she was laughing, her deep rumbling laugh that spilled out of her with joy. We all have our histories with our parents, but this is the first time I've begun to think of who she was outside of her motherhood. I am now older than she was in that picture. I keep trying to imagine what I would have thought of her had we been friends, not as an elder and a younger woman, but as equals. She was so very kind, and that's the thing that would have seduced me. And smart, and quietly droll. And I would have made her laugh. Are you kidding me? I would have said. Your daughter had no idea that you were blind in one eye until she was 27? She might have told me that she didn't want her child to be burdened by yet another one of her mother's disabilities. My balance is off because of my ear, and I fall so easily, she would have said. She didn't need to think of me as blind, too. I would have understood. But I would have pushed her. And you never told Walter? Never, she would have said. It wasn't his business. I would have rolled my eyes at that and laughed out loud, and that would have made her laugh too. So, what are you making for Thanksgiving? I would have said. Chopped liver, because she always made chopped liver. Do you guys still have sex? Her eyes would have widened, and then there would have been embarrassed laughter. Don't laugh, I would have said, do you? She needed a friend like me, someone she could tell anything to, someone who would have asked her about the first man she loved, the one who decided he didn't love her back. Sometimes when you're pushing 30, you decide not to be alone anymore. You make do. But as her friend, I would have asked, but why did you choose Walter? Why someone who got so angry with you all the time? You're smart, you're pretty, you have great legs. So why take on someone who would be a problem? She would have answered, it was time. But I would have pushed harder. You know, who made you believe you weren't worth more than that? And maybe she would have told me about her mother. her beautiful mother, with the tiny low nose, the full lips, and the large hazel eyes. She was the woman who men stared at as she walked by, the one who was embarrassed by the only daughter she had, the one who had become blind in one eye at the age of 4 from scarlet fever, and deaf in one ear, and who was always sickly. She was ashamed of that kid, ashamed that she was disabled, even though she was a brilliant student who excelled in everything except geography. And I would have said, you know what, Thelma? You deserved a mother who wasn't such a miserable narcissist. But my father loved me, she would have told me. He was the kindest man ever born. Everyone loved him. I might have looked at her for a moment too long, thinking, are you kidding me? That guy was such a coward. Why didn't he take better care of you and tell your mother to piss off when she was being such a witch? They deserved each other. But what I would have said, because she was a friend I loved, was, well, thank goodness you had him. And she might have looked at me a moment too long, knowing full well what I was really thinking, and smiled and said nothing at all.
Mihai Grunfeld was born in Cluj, Romania, where he lived until he made a daring escape from behind the Iron Curtain at the age of 18. In 1969, he traveled to Czechoslovakia, the beginning of a long journey that took him to Israel, Italy, Sweden, and Canada in search of a home in the West. Eventually, he settled in the US, obtained his PhD from UC Berkeley, and recently retired from Vassar College, where he taught Spanish and Latin American literature. A now longtime resident of Poughkeepsie, Mihai has published an autobiography, Leaving, Memories of Romania, and his novel was adapted as a play entitled The Dressmaker's Secret, which enjoyed a successful run in New York City. He joins us now to share his story, Silence. Please welcome Mihai Grunfeld.
I came home late that Thursday after a meeting that dragged on far too long. Anne's office light was still on. I grabbed an apple from the kitchen and settled into my chair in the living room. Outside, rain beat steadily against the windows. Danny and Maya, my children, barely looked up. Danny bent over his beading. Maya lost in the first volume of Harry Potter. Above them, on the highest shelf, my grandparents watched from an old cherrywood frame. Ermina, my grandmother in her 40s, quiet eyes, elegantly dressed. Emmanuel, my grandfather, in a dark suit, great fedora, looking into the distance. I study their faces often, searching for something of myself. I never met them. They died in Auschwitz and remain strangers to me, for me. I drew a breath. Danny, Maya, I said, did you know that your grandparents, my parents, were in the camps? No answer. Maybe I spoke too softly. I set down my apple, rose, and searched for the small envelope I keep beside my grandparents' frame. Inside are the few photographs I brought back from Romania. I draw one out, my parents, Ludovic and Rosalia, holding a baby in their arms. I remember 1988, when I returned from my father's funeral. My mother had been gone since 1969. At the Jewish cemetery, only a few neighbors waved from a distance. The sky was heavy and gray. I could not cry. Afterward, I unlocked our apartment on Muzeului Square with the help of a guard from the Jewish community organization. Time had stopped. The furniture was the same, the walls unpainted. In the bedroom, 3 beds crowded the space. On one lay 30 or so photographs and letters scattered. It looked as if my father had been reading them again and again, clinging to what little remained. The guard let me gather them. They are all that I carried home. Now, in our living room, I showed Danny and Maya one of these pictures. My father stands tall in a dark suit, his arm around my mother's waist. She wears a patterned dress and cradles a baby in white lace. They're smiling tentatively, as though joy might not last. Danny studies the photo, frowning. "Is that you?" he asks, pointing to the baby. "I'm not sure," I say. "It might be my brother. He was born first after they came back from the camps." Maya sets down her book and leans closer. "Were they nice? Did they play with you?" I hesitate. I don't remember play. I remember love, yes, fierce and protective, but shadowed by silence. My parents never married. Perhaps each still waited for the spouse who never returned. And yet, in the absence, they built a family. My brother, me. "Did they play with you?" Maya asks again. "No," I say softly. "They hugged me. They loved me. But they were sad." For a moment, neither child speaks. Maya holds the photo as though it might explain something words cannot. "You know the book I'm writing," I tell them. "It's about them and about me in Romania." Danny glances up. "Will you finish soon?" "Yes," I say, though my eyes are still on the photograph. My parents, proud and fragile, holding their baby as proof that life could begin again. They never met, Danny and Maya. By the time I adopted my children, my parents were gone. I placed the photo back in the envelope next to my grandparents' frame. I wonder if my children will think of my parents as their grandparents, or if my parents' distant lives will fade into silence as their stories almost did with me. Outside, the rain goes on. My children return to their books and beads, while I hold for a moment longer the weight of those photographs in my hand.
Neal Gomberg is an advertising copywriter who often wonders why he's an advertising copywriter. He's written hundreds of print and digital ads along with numerous TV commercials. He's also written songs for several of his TV commercials and recorded an album of original compositions with members of Bob Dylan's band. Currently, Neal works from home as a part-time freelance copywriter, which he says provides him with ample opportunities to write songs, work at a glacial pace on his first novel, learn card tricks, and lastly, do what he truly excels at, which is napping. Neal lives in Chappaqua with his psychologist wife and their 2 lovely daughters, and he now takes the stage to close Act 1 with his story, Dad's Selfies. Please say hello to Neal Gomberg.
I think I was 4 years old when my mother showed me my parents' wedding photo. In it, my parents looked so young, happy, and in love. My mother, in her long, flowing white gown, resembled a glamorous movie star. My father, in his formal tails and white bow tie, looked like Fred Astaire, if he'd had a nose roughly the size of Pinocchio's. This left me fearing that my nose was destined to grow to the same size as my father's. So I immediately studied recent photos of myself to see if my nose was growing. The good news was that my nose remained an age-appropriate size. The bad news was that my ears were growing. It stuck so far out that I looked like a carnival freak, half boy, half monkey. Which brings me to the day my father arrived home earlier than usual and frightened the living daylights out of me. His eyes were black, his nose bandaged. A car accident, he explained, but I'll be fine. And since my mother didn't seem concerned, I wasn't either. Eventually, my dad's face healed, but he looked different, so different that I wondered, is that the same man as in the wedding photo? I then compared the man in the wedding photo with the man who allegedly was my father and concluded they can't be the same. Because in the wedding photo, the man's nose is twice as big as my father's. So I asked my mother, did you exchange the man with the big nose for a man with a smaller nose? My mother laughed. Your father got a nose job, she said. It's an operation that turns his big nose into a smaller one. Well, I said, my ears make me look like a monkey. Can I get an ear job? To which my mother said, you'll grow into your ears. Shortly after that, I discovered yet another photo of my father on his dresser. It was taken with his Polaroid camera, which magically developed pictures in minutes. I should add here that my father was teetering on the edge of baldness. But in this recent photo, he spotted a full head of hair and now resembled Tony Bennett. How did you grow hair so fast? I asked my father, who explained that in the photo he was trying something called a toupee, which was sort of like a beanie with hair attached. The next day, my father arrived home, donning his new toupee and looking even less like my father. But he must have been pleased with his new improved appearance, because for days I found him smiling approvingly at Polaroids of him. I even caught him taking a photo of himself. So it's possible my father invented the selfie. Several weeks later, my dad excitedly announced, guess what? I'm going to have my own hour-long program. On TV, I asked? No, my father replied, radio. Which had me thinking, wait, my father got a smaller nose and hair so he can look good on the radio? My father then showed my mother and me yet another photo of him, posing proudly at WCAM, the local radio station. Eventually, I had a revelation. My father was vain, so vain that he was determined to be the best-looking man on the radio. I don't know if he ever was, but it didn't matter. My father grew in his career to great success in TV news. And just last week, I finally grew into my ears.
Writers Read gives voice to the stories that bind us, and in a publishing environment where it's often difficult to break through or experience new voices, we are a federally recognized 501c3 nonprofit with a mission to create performance opportunities for writers, which we do at events like this one, gathering to share stories and conversation and wine, things that nourish us all. I'm proud of our small volunteer team, proud of the work that we present on our stage, in our podcast, and now in this beautiful new hardcover anthology. Well Said, Well Read collects over 60 favorite stories from our first 10 years. And with important encouragement and support from Ricky Nenner, who's here in the house, we assembled this volume, and a quarter of the contributors are Hudson Valley writers. We are writers that represent Stone Ridge, Woodstock, High Falls, Gardner, Highland, New Paltz, Cold Spring, Poughkeepsie, and elsewhere. They are beautifully crafted stories, much like the ones you're hearing, thoughtful, moving, hilarious, and they are all just 2 pages, which makes this the ideal bedside or tableside companion, right? And so instead of scrolling your device with that, annoying blue light, which is going to affect your sleep, you could be reading one of these stories each night at bedtime. And if you resist the urge to consume this like a bag of chips, you have 2 months worth of stories here in this volume. It is available here for a special show-only price. Now here's where I become like a QVC pitchman, right? $29.99 at retail. Today only $25. And we have enough for everyone to take home 6. So I do hope that you will take at least one home with you today. I will say that, with the holidays upon us, you're invited to Thanksgiving. What a great host gift, right? Or Christmas, how nice will this look with greens, right? It's red and it's white. So anyway, please consider taking one home with you today. We're going to break here for 15 minutes for a leg stretch. And when you hear this bell, that will be your signal to please return to your seats for a great second half with more great stories. I'm Ed McCann, and this is Writers Read. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back to the second half of our show, The Photograph, here at CPW in Kingston, New York. Before we bring up the next writer, I want to thank CPW's Executive Director, Brian Wallace, and CPW's Treasurer, Nadine Lemon, for making us feel so very welcome here. Thanks, too, to our Marketing Committee co-chairs, Allison Gargagliano and Deborah Freed, to our Senior Editor, Stephen Lewis, our Writers Read Board President, Sarah Marone, Production Director, Kevin O'Connor, who you see walking back and forth here. He's just completely invisible. Our Executive Producer, Richard Kolath, our Data Analyst and Operations Specialist, Carol Wood, and our 2 digital media production interns here today, Anissa Garcia and Victor Scopa, for your time and talent and effort. Thank you. Thanks very much. Irene O'Garden opens Act 2 of today's show, and she has won or been nominated for prizes in every writing category, from stage to e-screen, hardcovers, children's books, as well as literary magazines and anthologies. And she was awarded a Pushcart Prize for her lyric essay, Glad to Be Human, included in a book of essays by that same name. Irene is a true creator, and in addition to writing scores of poems, essays, plays, books, and a 16-minute choral piece, Irene is also a calligrapher who enjoys lettering and illumination, drawing, gardening, and cooking. She also founded and for 25 years produced and hosted a theme-based spoken word series not unlike Writers Read called The Art Garden, and that was a performing literary magazine that shares some of our DNA. She traveled from her home in the Hudson Highlands today to share her story, Primal Experience, and I'm so pleased to welcome her back to our Writers Read stage. This is Irene O'Garden.
It hangs above our tub. Live oaks playing London Bridge with one another over a 2-track, mud-packed road into the wilds of Ossabaw, a barely inhabited barrier island off the coast of Georgia. The image rendered crisply in black and white back when there were dark rooms. Moss, vines, overlapping silhouettes branching in 100 ways, as my consciousness branched when I took my very first month-long artist retreat there at age 29. Just out of view, wild turkeys, wild boars, wild bulls, alligators, deer, endless sky, pristine driftwood beaches, which I paced, feeling like a Picasso giantess. I walked that 2-track road 4 miles each way, each week, to reach a phone to call my boyfriend John in New York, where I stayed There was no plumbing or electricity, just a rebuilt coop on a tiny organic farm at the center of the island. The Genesis Project, it was called. In exchange for a weekly workday of farm chores and cooking for the other residents, artists received all the time in the world for whatever they wished to do. I arrived, a jangle of anxiety, lugging my bedding and towels, my art supplies and foolscap, and whimsically, a corncob pipe to see if I'd like my dad's tobacco. I was giving up the theater, my heart's expression since adolescence, and seeing if I could illustrate an early American folk hymn as a children's book. But who the hell did I think I was anyway? How dare I spend this time on art? I'm no artist. I don't deserve this time. Who's going to care anyway? I should never have come here. If you have ever taken an artist's retreat, you know that is always the opening monologue. Happily, when you are surrounded by the infinite experiments of nature, it doesn't take that long for you to follow suit. You shortly realize there's no one right way of doing things. No wrong answers, just one's more effective than others. And the way to discover them is to play around until you find them. When you have committed to a month away, there's nothing to distract you from discovery. My best discovery as an artist was to allow chance in my work. I was working with feather quills, cutting them to various widths to see if I could use them in my project. By the light of the kerosene lamp one night, I cut one incorrectly. The messy, spattery line it made spoiled a completed watercolor. I howled and cursed it and myself for quite a length of wick. Then the thought popped in. How can I use this as if it were a dropped prop on stage? I played with that crooked quill and its feisty models and found ways to use them, which loosened both me and my work. I was free to follow any creative impulse. I wove palmetto fans, whittled wrens and egrets, completed a series of poems, made music with shells, glass jars, and my drum-like plastic water bottle. Finished the hymn illustrations, and unexpectedly started work on the first book I would later publish. I laughed when I realized that I lived in New York in complete physical comfort, but with an itchy psyche. Here, the reverse was true. My body underwent one discomfort after another. Flocks of gnats, a pulled muscle, nicking and banging myself with unfamiliar tools, a cozy cat's gift of fleas, slicing my foot on oyster shells. Small price to pay, though, for primal experience. Eggs and milk warm from the animals. Seeing an alligator snatch a deer. Slaughtering a turkey for Easter dinner. My introduction to organic gardening. My reintroduction to darkness and silence. What infinitely soft noises we can hear. What little light we need to see by. Genesis, indeed. No single experience has engendered more in me. Captured right there above our tub.
Anne Levin is a widely published writer and book reviewer who enjoyed a long journalistic career at the Associated Press, covering elections as well as every imaginable natural and human disaster. Originally from Western Pennsylvania, Ann traveled north to Smith College for her undergraduate studies, south to the University of Texas for her creative writing graduate degree with a minor in beer and barbecue, and then finally opted for the East, that is New York's Upper East Side, where she and her husband now live. Ann's work appears in many literary publications like the Coachella Review, Craft Literary, and The Inquisitive Eater. And the story she now shares is The Three Graces of Ninth Avenue. Please welcome Ann Levin.
You probably know my husband, not because you've ever met him, but because you've seen some of the pictures he took on 9/11. One is of a man in a business suit, trudging through the rubble of the ruined Trade Center, still holding his briefcase. The other is of an elegantly dressed woman captured in the eerie yellow light of a building lobby, covered head to toe in dust. Ed Fine and Marcy Borders. Stan's photographs of them showed up everywhere the day after the attacks and still do on the anniversary of the event. But they aren't hanging on the walls of our apartment for the simple reason that they're a reminder of a singularly horrible day in our lives and the sad fact that we humans can't seem to stop killing each other. Instead, I want to tell you about a picture that does hang on our walls, the image I love best, the one that illustrates another aspect of humanity, friendship, camaraderie, longevity, even love. It shows three women standing in a circle in the middle of 9th Avenue during the annual food festival in May. They're in their late 60s or early 70s, all about the same height, with neatly coiffed gray hair and eyeglasses. All three are wearing mid-calf skirts, short-sleeve tops, tasteful jewelry, and sensible shoes. The two closest to the camera have tote bags slung over their shoulders, one with a quilted starburst, the kind you might get at craft fairs, the other with a repeating logo of WNET Channel 13. The woman farthest away is gesticulating with her finger as if making an important point about what she heard on the McNeil-Lair NewsHour the night before. I don't know how Stan picked them out of the crowd that day or why he thought they'd be a worthy subject. I was scattered, distracted by a million sights and smells, the fragrant food stalls, throngs of people, and jumble of restaurants, delis, bodegas, and bars lining the avenue as far as the eye could see, each storefront festooned with an eye-catching sign proclaiming the owner's heritage: Caribbean, Korean, Filipino, Italian, Chinese, Peruvian, Thai. He took the picture in 1989, the year we moved to New York. Those were the times when we were intent on exploring the farthest corners of every borough, avidly attending the very same street fairs we now do our best to avoid. Since then, I've never tired of looking at it. There's something about their faces, plus my presumption that they're Jewish, that reminds me so much of the teachers in my synagogue and the older women who used to sit on high stools behind the counters of their sons' clothing or camera or jewelry stores on Main Street, keeping an eye on whoever came in and out the front door. Now it's 36 years later, and Stan and I are both about as old as those Altacuckers in the picture, a bit withered and wrinkled and slightly stooped over. I've always thought there was something timeless about the photo, though I never could quite put my finger on what it was. Until the other day, when we were walking through Central Park and saw a fountain adorned with the sculpture, Three Dancing Maidens. It shows a trio of girls holding hands in a circle, their dresses clinging to their bodies as if they'd gotten wet from the spray. That's when it occurred to me that our picture was another example of an iconic female threesome, like the godmother of them all, the Three Graces, the Roman work of art at the Metropolitan Museum representing beauty, mirth, and abundance, the handmaidens of Aphrodite. Of course, the three matrons in Stan's picture are no longer young or beautiful or graceful, and they certainly aren't naked. But just like that marble statue group from the 2nd century AD, they endure.
Stephen Lewis identifies first as a husband, father, and grandfather, then, in short order, as a writer, mentor, and editor. He's also a former mentor at SUNY Empire State College and the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College, as well as a longtime freelance writer and editor. He's been published widely from the New York Times to Washington Post, and with 7 children and 17 grandchildren, a very long list of parenting publications. Steve and his wife Patty live under the shadow of Bonteque Crag in New Paltz, and his recent books include a novel, The Lights Around the Shore, and a poetry collection titled Fire in Paradise, co-authored with his daughter, Elizabeth Bayou Grace. A new poetry collection, Infinity Mirrors of Love and Grief, will be published next month. He takes the stage now to present his story, Inked and Linked. Please welcome Stephen Lewis.
The photograph is my Facebook profile. On the left is a grizzled older man, easily in his 70s, wearing a Jerry Garcia t-shirt, his long white hair curling out from under a baseball cap, boyish grin edging into a juvenile smirk. He is standing next to a sweet, smooth-faced boy. You'd guess him to be 20. Baseball hat on backwards, a wise and self-contained smile in stark contrast to the beaming old dog on his right. I'm the grizzled old dog. Sleeve pushed up to show the camera the new tattoo of birds from some recent travels, an homage to my beautiful wife, a passionate birder. Our grandson, Rory, is on the right. Palm turned to the camera to show the tattoo of Hatteras Island, North Carolina, on his smooth arm. As with our 7 kids and most of the other 16 grands, Rory had spent every summer of his life and some Easters and even a few Thanksgivings on Hatteras, a raw, rusty, windy, unpredictable barrier island off the coast of North Carolina. No charming thrills, no pretensions, big waves, sand, shrimp, barbecue, crabs. The island is so ingrained in this family's spirit that its iconic outline was the first tattoo I got 25 years ago at Pat's Tats in Woodstock. Rory, our oldest daughter's second oldest child by minutes, he's a twin, had always liked the tattoo of Hatteras. As a little boy, he'd run his finger along the shoreline of my forearm. So when it came time, in the way that things become time in large families, he asked me to come along with him to High Dive Tattoo up the alley off Main Street in New Paltz. To say I was honored to accompany him in the life passage would be to vastly underestimate the depth of the satisfaction or the humility that comes with a grandchild inviting you into the inner sanctum. The two of us must have made such an odd couple, separated by 56 summers and the weight of years, his skin baby soft, smooth, mine leathery, wrinkled. As I held the glass door open to the studio and he walked in past me. Rory went first. Tattoo artist Cooper Cassiano leaning into his timeless art, ink gun buzzing, something already indelible in the air. I was next. First, a magnificent frigate we saw in the Galapagos, then a painted bunting from Port Royal, South Carolina. And when it was all done, traces of blood wiped away, I handed Cooper my phone, and he took a picture of the two of us, the one on Facebook. In a life of unearned abundance, in love and children and a few things impossible to photograph, there have been so many good days that most of them have been forgotten in the chaotic whoosh of life. But there are also the great days, the ones forever etched into every moment of consciousness, tattoos on the soul, that accompany me everywhere I travel, sustain me through the days and nights of deep anguish when nothing else will soothe my aching heart. Those great days include my marriage and the 7 births, of course, as well as the 7 marriages and 17 births to follow, each one an affirmation of love's abiding nature. And then there's the afternoon Rory and I got tattoos together, memorialized in that profile picture, a great day of the most generative and generous kind, an alchemy in ink linking us beyond our indelible tribal blood, our eyes meeting in the timeless smirk of young boys, pinky swears, blood brothers, sliced palms pressing flesh, inked arms linked around each other's shoulders as we walked out the glass door of High Dive Tattoo into a joyful, sunny afternoon, still buzzing in my arm, in my chest, in my ears today. That sweet boy at my side, the two of us wandering along our shared barrier island under a Carolina blue sky, blinding sun, sea oats swaying, ocean sparkling, waves waist high.
Peter Wortmann claims that he is a one-trick pony, with screenwriting his only skill. Fresh out of college, Peter got a fellowship in fiction to the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, which led to a short story being published in a literary magazine founded by a famous American writer who died in a motorcycle accident before the story was released in print. That tragedy cast a shadow on his victory, but he has gone on to write dozens of film and TV projects, working for and with Ron Howard, Steven Spielberg, and Luc Besson, among others. Born and bred in New York City, Peter says a mystifying turn of events brought him to Woodstock, where he now lives, screening films for the Woodstock Film Festival, writing about film for Chronogram magazine, and developing new projects for screens both big and small. I'm delighted to welcome him to our stage today to present his story entitled Waterfall. Please give a warm welcome to Peter Wortmann.
It's just one moment. They all are, of course, by definition, a snapshot. But the waterfall pushes back hard. I know the water was falling because I was there Tuesday, July 22nd, 2024, 9:28 p.m. But here, now reduced to a 5x7 print push pin to the sheetrock in my office, the water is still. Still as my kid Clay was, his back to me, his head tilted in thought, his hands pushed deep in his pants pockets, standing there silhouetted, all in black, right at the edge of the flat gray lake, into which that utterly massive amount of water endlessly fell. And just as the falling of the water has been arrested, the moment has been silenced. That place, that time, was loud, loud, loud. My father died when I was 14. He was in my life for 5,392 days. As Clay came through his childhood, I became increasingly aware that, if I was lucky, there would come a day when I would be in Clay's life longer than my father had been in mine. That day was Thursday, August 2nd, 2007. I'm a lucky guy. Clay stands alone, facing the waterfall. How did we get here? The straightforward answer is that I made a promise more than a decade ago, 2 promises. I told Clay's sister, Zoe, that I would take her to Liverpool to see a football match at Anfield. And I told Clay I'd take him to Iceland. Time passed. I'm not much for travel. I don't have a bucket list. I have more of a non-bucket list of places I've been told I must see. Like when someone says, you have to go to Barcelona, and I think, no, actually, I don't. I look at this photo and wonder, could this have been anywhere? What is the thing about travel? I remember finding out as we walked from the empty parking lot that it was not the first time Clay had seen this waterfall, only the first time in person. It had become known as the Game of Thrones waterfall, Skogafoss. I'd like to believe I remember the visceral feeling, the unthinkable power of that water dropping 200 feet over those ancient sea cliffs, the cold, hazy mist that drained the whole scene to monochrome, the kind of loud it actually was. But I don't. The power of the photo, for me, is in its ambivalence. The stunning landscape should hold my attention. It certainly did then, but now it seems to be a frame for considering the idea that my 32-year-old boy is looking away from me, seeing a world I don't see, and moving toward a world I won't be alive to see at all. Plus, Clay has decided not to have children of his own. Ours will be his only father-son relationship. And yeah, everybody seems to say that he's still young, he might change his mind, but they're wrong. He won't. They don't understand how beautifully true to himself Clay is. I can't imagine what it would be like as an adult to have a conversation with one's father. I try sometimes. I think about my week with Clay in Iceland, which was really pretty fabulous. We're both good talkers, maybe even good listeners, and the backdrops were often breathtaking. They must have been. I'm sure they were. I try to game out what it would have been like to be him talking to me. Maybe in that moment, turning to see me, taking a picture. What would he say? But of course, that won't get me there either. I can't play my own father. Why does travel so often show up on bucket lists? What about talk?
Photography is a topic near and dear to Daisy Sindelar's heart. A journalist and editor who spent 30 years living and working in Eastern Europe, she grew up entranced by the photos in her mother's small-town high school yearbook. As a reporter, her favorite way to start an interview, when it's appropriate, is by looking through family photo albums and listening to the stories that emerge. And Daisy, by the way, says she has rarely ever been photographed without blinking at exactly the wrong moment. Daisy now divides her time between Prague and the Hudson Valley, and she says her life was altered by a chance encounter with a photo of a woman looking for a husband, and says that things have not been the same since. She joins us now to present that story, The Matchmaker. Please give a warm welcome to Daisy Sindelar.
I know many women who have influenced my life in all sorts of good and bad ways, but there is only one woman who changed my life entirely, and her I don't know at all. All I know is that one day she posed for a photograph in a country where women take their poses seriously. She curled her bangs and put on a crisp white blouse, and then, for a flash of color, added a thin red necktie, like the kind we wore in the 80s, knotted loosely at the sternum. She sank into an upholstered sofa, faded yellow wallpaper at her back, and then, with the faintest of smiles, looked past the camera and into the land of possibility that is the middle distance. The photograph arrived in an envelope addressed to me. I was the editor of a small expat newspaper, a busy career kid who posed horribly for photographs and had no time for the middle distance. But I did like opening mail. The photograph came with a letter. She wrote, in perfect English, "This type of cross-border search for romance and companionship is all new to me. I'm not sure how to approach it." In fact, she seemed to know exactly how to approach it, with the same spare, wistful curation that had gone into staging her living room portrait. Just a half page long, her letter unblinkingly dispensed with biological particulars up top, stating matter-of-factly that she weighed 57 kilos, was 1.64 meters tall, and had an 11-year-old son. But from there, the focus softened. She wrote, "I am sincere, kind, caring, a good cook. I want to have a real friend, loving, tender, and understanding." And then the line that changed my life. "I am 31 years old," she said, "but I still believe in love." I am 31 years old, but I still believe in love? My first reaction was strictly editorial. We don't run classified ads, and this letter, while beautifully written, has no home in my paper. My second reaction, I must admit, was pity. Yes, the women in this country posed beautifully for photographs. To be accidentally caught next to one in a snapshot was utter defeat. But these were also women who seemed to race into marriage far too young and to grow old, as a result, way too fast. Imagine being just 31 and thinking you've passed your sell-by date. It all felt terribly sad and old world. Why, here I was, a young American, running a paper in a faraway country, my days full of industry, my nights free of commitment. You wouldn't catch me writing my weight in a letter to the editor. What a shame not everyone felt the same freedom. But as is often the case when, at the height of our well-being, we issue summary judgment, an unexpected third reaction suddenly wormed its way in. And this one was pure, sneaking terror. Oh no. I'm 31. Am I old? Has love passed me by? Good God, I have got to get married right away. What happened next has been condensed for time, but is only barely an exaggeration. I put down the letter, got up from my desk, flew home to the United States, and married the first man I met on the street. A baby followed shortly thereafter, and predictably, a divorce shortly after that. An entire relationship life cycle shot out of a cannon and conducted at warp speed, 2 years tip to tail, all thanks to a woman with a red tie who, it turns out, knew much more at 31 than I did. My baby is now grown. I married again, a bit more methodically this time. I don't know what happened to the woman in the picture, but I hope she found the friend, loving and tender that she sought. I hope she gets to say, I am 57 years old, goddammit, and I still believe in love.
Music has always been a grand passion for Ellen Nenner, propelling her from New York's famous High School of Music and Art to the even more famous Juilliard School. Today, she is a trustee at Master Voices, a not-for-profit performing arts institution dedicated to the power of the human voice. In addition, Ellen studied economics and philosophy at Mount Holyoke, urban planning at the New School, and was a writer and editor for McKinsey. Luckily for us, Ellen also studied at the Sarah Lawrence Writing Institute, where her facility with words took her in new directions. These days, she's working on a book of connected essays and short stories for her daughters, Lisa and Jackie, and her grandson, Colby, and today shares her story of a photograph entitled Fadeout. Please join me in welcoming Ellen Nenner.
Your photograph has faded dramatically since last summer. I shouldn't be surprised. Instead, I should accept the fact that there is no way to harness the splinters of light that bypass the shades I pull down over the windows when I leave the house each summer. This, despite the fact that the manufacturer assured me that my designer solar shades would allow for only minimal light gaps. You sit in your elegant Art Nouveau frame on the walnut console, a safe distance from most of the windows in the bedroom. You have been gone for 20 years. Every summer, when I return to the house in Truro and see the photographs further decline, I consider moving you to a more congenial spot, one that would allow me to preserve a little longer the color of your sideburns and eyebrows just below the brim of your white cap. Like the curochrome, people would remark, to describe the intense reddish orange of the hair that trumpeted your arrival wherever you went. But I am afraid I am too late. What the camera captured is now your ghost sitting on the beach, your right leg bent under your left arm draped over your left knee. The ocean is behind you. A mere 10 or so steps would allow your feet to feel the cold water as it laps up and around your ivory ankles. The ocean rolling in to meet you is no longer blue, but variegated stripes of gray. The sand is nothing other than sheet white. You are wearing a long-sleeved blue and white plaid shirt, one of your favorites, with the cuffs rolled up midway to your elbows. Until this year, I could still make out a bit of the design. The shirt is now pale gray, though a shadow passing across your upper body makes it a slightly darker color. I can barely distinguish where your ankles and the sand begins. The white bucket hat on your head shades your face from the sun. I look closely at your complexion from the tip of your nose to your jawline. There's the unblemished white skin, the product, so your mother Clara believed, of her relentless assault on the freckles that are written into the gene pool of every redhead. You luxuriated in milk baths from the moment you were born until you were embarrassed to confide you were simply too big for your mother to maneuver into a bathtub. Spending time on the beach is unusual for you, but you seem relaxed in the photo. Your eyes are almost closed, your expression rather pensive. Perhaps you have decided that the scene of fine-grained sand, white foam ocean waves, and seagulls gliding on the wind is worth the wait for a parking space at Long Nook and a hike up and down a steep path to the beach. Or maybe I'm romanticizing and you're simply squinting because your sunglasses are on the towel underneath you rather than shielding your eyes. It's clear that you will soon fade completely from the photograph. I must act now and move you to another place in my bedroom. It is, of course, my bedroom alone. You were seriously ill when we first bought the house and died just 6 months before we were supposed to move in. I can't allow you to disappear again. I look around for a spot closer to me this time, but there's a problem. My Art Nouveau treasure is too large for the nearby night table to accommodate. I start to remove the photograph from its stylish frame, to slip it into a small, inconsequential plastic one, when, to my amazement, a small picture of you, wedged behind the larger one, falls into my hands. You're smiling, your face lustrous, your hair in all its glory for everyone to admire. You have been here all along.
Margarita Meyendorff, known to many as Morka, is an author of 2 published books. Her memoir, DP, Displaced Person, recently translated into Russian, and an anthology of 30 short stories entitled Flipping the Bird. Her short stories have been published in literary journals such as Passenger, The Phoenix, The Dallas Review, and Story Unlikely. And her story Chewing Gum was included in Writers' Read anthology Well Read, Well Said. Did I mention this book that we have, by the way? Morka was born displaced in a refugee camp in Germany, far from the opulence of Imperial Russia that was her birthright. She's performed as an actress, a dancer, a musician, and a storyteller at venues throughout the United States and in Europe. And Morka is currently at work on her 3rd book entitled The Magic Bus, a memoir of her and her husband's camping adventures, camping in a VW Westphalia bus. She and her husband live in High Falls, and she joins us now to present My Cousin Irina. Please welcome Margarita Meyendorff.
For years, I kept her photographed tucked in my special folder. Irina von Meyendorff was my cousin, long dead and a famous film star. Her beauty bewitched me, as it had millions of Europeans. But as stunning as she was, her photograph both haunted and troubled me. She had starred in several German propaganda films during World War II, and for years I feared with her perfect blonde Aryan beauty she had been a Nazi. But was she? After years of sneaking peeks at her glossy photograph, I dared to discover the truth. Researching for my memoir, Displaced Person, I quizzed my much older brother George, who is the only living member of the Meyendorff family to remember meeting Irina. George saw the famous Irina under amazing circumstances. On a warm summer afternoon in 1946, a year before I was born during my family's exile, George watched as a tall, stunning blonde stepped out of a green Fiat convertible gleaming with gold trim. She walked towards my family's barrack housing at the Russian refugee camp in Uchte, West Germany. My parents and 2 half-brothers had found shelter there after fleeing the Soviet army and Allied bombing in Vienna. They had to pass through Nazi-held Germany to get there, and their passport was stamped with the swastika. My family had been given safe passage because we bore a German name. But we were not German. We were Russian aristocrats, despised by both the Soviets and the Nazis. During her surprise visit to the DP camp, Irina brought delicious cream pastries, and my two brothers couldn't take their eyes off her, this superstar who seemed happy to share afternoon tea with these poor, exiled relatives in post-war Germany. What was the story behind the gorgeous blonde on the movie poster, which had been used as a Nazi propaganda? A note attached stated that she was the #1 pinup girl for German soldiers during World War II. Irina was born in 1916 in Revel, now Tallinn, Estonia. When the Bolshevik Revolution erupted in 1917, the family escaped to Germany, hiding the family jewels in infant Irina's baby carriage. As a teenager, already matured into breathtaking beauty, she led a bohemian existence around the theaters and concert halls of Weimar, Germany. In the early 1930s, she moved to Berlin to work as a film editor in the grandiose UFA film studios. Her beauty attracted Joseph Goebbels, chief propagandist for the Nazi Party, and her film career skyrocketed under his watchful eye. Irina admitted, "I was considered the image of the ideal German woman, pretty, kind, stupid, and faithful." Irina never believed in the propaganda her photo symbolized, although her name was forever linked to two notorious Nazis, Joseph Goebbels and Hermann Göring. Her first husband, Dr. Heinz Zahler, was appointed as personal physician to Hermann Göring, Hitler's right-hand man who oversaw the Gestapo. Göring was addicted to morphine, and her husband Zahler treated him with codeine. "Kill him," Irina urged her then husband. "You could overdose him and no one would suspect." He didn't. Later, Joseph Goebbels, who promoted Irina's career, attempted to seduce her, but she rejected Goebbels, even at the risk of her own life. "You would degrade me," Irina had told him in her iciest tone. Her film career in Germany took a nosedive after rejecting Goebbels, but she was to marry 4 times and make many more films, including Meyerling in 1968 with Omar Sharif and Catherine Deneuve. After languishing for decades in a folder, today I admire my cousin's framed photograph in a place of honor in my home. When I look at her photograph now, I see not Hitler's ideal German woman, but something far more powerful, a Russian aristocrat who never forgot who she was. The Nazis may have used her image, but they never owned her soul. In a world that demanded she became a symbol of hatred, Irina von Meyendorff remained, quietly and defiantly, herself. Edward McCann, an award-winning writer and producer, is the founder of Writers Read. For over a decade, Ed and a team of dedicated volunteers have worked to present hundreds of stories at dozens of high-quality events like this one, with partners like Carnegie Hall, Bryant Park, Vassar College, the National Arts Club, and City Winery. Ed's own writing has appeared in many journals and magazines, including Country Living, The Irish Echo, and The Sun. Ed and his partner, Richard Colath, share their Gardner home and studio with the Louisiana rescue mutt named Willie. And Ed now closes our show with his essay entitled Snapshot. Please give a warm welcome back to Ed McCann.
She is a beautiful and formidable 48-year-old woman modeling a pink LL Bean spring jacket before a wall of blooming yellow forsythia on a cool morning in March. The color is called cranberry, she said, as she pulled the jacket up over her shoulders. I raised the camera to eye level and framed a medium close-up as she turned the collar and adjusted the pale pink scarf she draped around her neck. She angled slightly left, then right, then brought her hands into the frame, taking hold of the plackets, a move that revealed her gold wedding band and Claddagh ring. Her facial expression in the photo is neutral and open, the gaze both soft and knowing. Earlier, I'd watched her apply subtle makeup and use a curling iron to style her steel gray hair. She looked better that day than she ever would again, and we both knew it. Click. The model is my sister, the location my backyard, and it was the day following her first chemotherapy treatment. This is what cancer looks like today, she said. She soon lost her hair, and with no effort, she finally reached, then slid past, the Weight Watchers goal weight she pursued for years, by denying herself dessert and by pulling on her sneakers and running miles each week. She died in January, a stunning reverse gestation of exactly 9 months. It's now been over 3 decades since that spring morning, and I am now a dozen years older than my oldest sister would ever be. The photograph, displayed in a frame of fused white glass flecked with shards of cranberry, anchors a small constellation of family photos featuring my other siblings, nieces, nephews, and special friends on a stand-up desk in my office. It's a kind of hall of fame of people I love, the supporting cast of my life. I home to that spot several times each workday to open mail, to reach for a stapler or tape gun, or to feed the tropical fish in the aquarium where the fax machine used to be. And nearly every time, I make eye contact with my sister. Over the past 33 years, I have viewed this particular photograph more than any other. While waiting for pages from the printer, I sometimes study small details like her gold earrings or the shapes of the forsythia blossoms that form the backdrop. Hundreds of tiny yellow stars surrounding my bright star of a sister, the sibling and friend who shared both my DNA and sense of humor. Her sphinx-like gaze allows me great latitude for projection, reading into her expression either enigmatic wisdom, unblinking judgment, or timeless perspective, but always a silent challenge, an admonishment to pay attention, be present, be grateful, and to focus on the things and the people that really matter. Dottie had been sober for over 20 years that day, sponsoring others I sometimes met at special anniversary meetings when she addressed the rooms with ease and grace. She trusted me with her story and her unvarnished truth. And in this photograph, I see both resignation and recognition, a surrender to what cannot be changed, and the acknowledgement of reality as it is. The photograph captures a moment when resistance dissolved into understanding. The miniature gooseneck lamp on the desk lights that photo, and when I see dust has accumulated on the glass, I spritz some cleaner on a cloth, never on her face, and wipe it clean to clear her vision and mine. I smile then, recalling a time when helpless laughter doubled us both over, one of the many times I really saw her. And it occurs to me before switching off the light that perhaps more than anyone else, and in a way that really mattered, she saw me too. Have the writers come up. Writers, everybody up. All the writers, let's go. What we're doing here today is actually culture work, which in our current climate seems more important than ever. Writers Read was built around events like this one, and it is both humbling and electrifying to spend this kind of curated time with such a fine group of writers. And I'm so proud of what a small group of committed volunteers continues to build with me. We are working to scale up, to attract more writers, followers, listeners, and to make the work of talented writers available to a wider audience. The funds that keep our wheels turning come from you, our friends, and our donors. Your donations are an investment in our mission, and I ask that you please consider a tax-deductible gift today in any amount to help us get there. Scanning the code on one of those banners in the gallery will take you to a donation page on our website. Another way that you could help would be to take your program home with you. Don't leave it behind. Take it home and give it to someone who you think would be interested in what we do here, either as a writer or someone who might enjoy being here or even who might like to support our mission. We cannot do what we do without your encouragement and support, so that this round of applause from all of us up here is for you. I hope that you will stick around for some wine and conversation, take a book home, hang out with the writers and each other. And we have one more. Did I mention this book? Did I mention this? It's red. You can't miss it. We have one more thing to do, and we have not rehearsed it, so bear with us. Come on up here, you guys.